little pigs, let me come in. Not by the hair on your chinny chin chin. Then I'll huff, and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house in.
Hello and welcome to beautiful Muncie, Indiana, the home of Sweet Shiznit's podcast, Ball State University, and my beautiful host, Krista White. I am your host, Jason White, and if you didn't hear me already, this is the Sweet Shiznit's podcast. Sometimes that's a mouthful. Krista, would you like to tell our lovely fans what the Sweet Shiznit's podcast is?
This would be a podcast where we watch lots of 80s movies. And after we watch an 80s movie, we get on here and we talk about that movie.
We do. We talk about the movie. We talk about all the ins and outs and facts and facets about the movie. We enjoy the movies. We like comedy movies.
We do not always enjoy the movie.
Well, that's true. Some of the movies we've not enjoyed. We talk about all the different facets of the movie. We've talked about comedy movies. We've talked about one drama movie in particular. We've talked about, I guess, Dirty Dancing's kind of a drama movie as well. Adventure movies, horror movies. Seems like
horrible movies.
I don't know what category Desperately Seeking Susan falls into other than horrible movies. It's maybe supposed to be a comedy movie, but it wasn't particularly funny. So,
well, then there was Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. You know,
that was a comedy
movie.
It was a comedy.
Horrible.
It was an adventure.
Comedy movie.
It was a com-adventure. A comedy adventure.
A horrible com-adventure?
I quite enjoyed it.
Oh, okay.
And I will enjoy it again, I'm sure, at some point.
I don't know.
So, we do this.
Hey, Jason. Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Here's Johnny.
Here's Johnny!
So, before we get into our movie this week, we actually do have one new review. Let me see if I can find it. I did not put it in our show notes.
Way to go.
So I will take full credit for that being missing.
Hey, do you see this L on my forehead?
I do.
All right, just check.
But I should probably be focusing on looking at our notes.
You haven't yet, so.
Yeah, well, stuff happens.
But it's not in the notes.
It's not there. So apparently it didn't make it, or it might have been a foreign one. And so it does not show up.
A foreign one.
Yes, if it's someone who's not American, they will not show up in our iTunes reviews unless we go and look for them.
That means they're not being tortured by the big orange baby.
Right. So, but a few other things that we will talk about. We'll talk about what's going on in the movies currently. So last week you heard me rant about how frustrating it was to see lots of sequels and remakes. And unfortunately, this week seems to be more of the same. The big movie at the theaters this week is the live-action remake of Aladdin.
I don't know that that's a remake.
What else would it be?
I don't know. It doesn't seem like a remake if it's brought to life.
It's still the same movie that they remade.
I guess.
With
but
a
it
very
seems different if it's going from like Exorcist from the 80s to Exorcist from to 2019 or whatever.
That's
not the
still
same.
A remake. It's not a sequel. It's just a remake.
It's live.
Yeah, and It's got a very creepy Will Smith.
We're probably going to have to watch it
at some point. It's not for the podcast necessarily.
I didn't say for the podcast.
Aladdin wasn't an 80s movie.
I don't know what movie it was. 90s?
90s. And here in another month or so, there will be a new, I don't know, they kind of dubbed it as a live action version of The Lion King. It's not really live action because they're not like real lions. They're still animated, but they're CGI. So the lions don't sing and dance like they did on the 90s, early 90s cartoon version of The Lion King.
They don't get in a hot tub and have gas.
That was not a lion. That was a warthog.
Same color, same car.
Yes. And then the other big thing coming out is Men in Black International, which is the 4th installment in the Men in Black series. So this one does not have Tommy Lee Jones or Will Smith in it.
Well, that's because he's in Aladdin.
Yeah, he's busy creeping everyone out as the genie in
I
Aladdin.
don't think that makes him creepy.
Well, he's not creepy, but the genie is creepy that he plays.
Well, that's the director's fault.
Yeah, whoever did all the effects in that movie. So this one has one of the Hemsworth brothers, I believe Liam, who's Australian, but in this movie's British because, for us Americans, British and Australian are basically the same thing.
I don't think so. I really don't because I have, those accent issues, and Australian is totally different than British.
You have a lot easier time.
With Australian accents.
Right.
That is correct. And the Australians' teeth are much better than British teeth.
That's what I hear.
It's true.
I mean, they do have like dentists in Britain, so I think that's not always necessarily true.
It doesn't change the fact that one set of people take care of their teeth better than the other. Just saying. Saying.
So, but this week's movie that we did watch.
Hey, Jason. Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Here's Johnny.
Here's Johnny!
So we watched The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson.
We watched The Dole Show.
We watched Men in Black, where they shined lights in people's faces so they would forget everything.
No.
No?
It must be what happens to me every day.
Because you forget everything?
Not everything, just stuff.
So actually the movie we watched was the 1980 horror movie classic based on the Stephen King novel, The Shining.
Achoo!
What you did? He killed you and Danny.
You did this to me. Didn't you? How could you? How could you?
Here's Johnny!
And so this is a unique trailer because it doesn't ever say what movie it is.
That was a long intro. I could have made microwave popcorn.
That was about a third of the actual trailer, so it could have been
like a
much longer.
semi-trailer? Was
Yes.
that like a double white trailer?
It was like a single white trailer.
So it wasn't a semi-trailer.
No. It was
How many
just
bedrooms did I have?
2.
How many bathrooms? No, I think I had 3 bedrooms.
2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, but it had a big, great room with the living room, dining room together.
No. Single white trailers do not have a great
They
room.
were side by side, not end to
That
end.
is still not a great room. No,
It was
you are
a
mistaken.
above average room.
You are definitely mistaken.
So-
Anyhow,
So The Shining was a 1980 horror film. It, again, was based on a novel by Stephen King, but it was written and directed by Stanley Kubrick. and it starred Jack Nicholson and Shelley Duvall.
A very young Jack Nicholson.
A very young Jack Nicholson.
Still not attractive then either.
Also a very young Shelley Duvall.
Let's just move on.
Shelley Duvall went on to play
Nothing.
Olive Oil in the Popeye movie with Robin Williams.
That makes sense also.
Robin Williams was considered for this role.
All right.
And was passed on because,
He's just too
surprisingly, Stanley Kubrick, he considered both Robert De Niro and Robin Williams. He thought Robert De Niro was not crazy enough, and he thought Robin Williams was too crazy.
Robin Williams would be too funny for it.
So he also briefly considered Harrison Ford.
I can't see that.
Yeah, that would have. I don't know that would have worked at all. But Jack Nicholson
was just
the right amount of crazy.
Woohoo!
So Stephen King disagreed. Stephen King did not really care for the Jack Nicholson portrayal because in the book, apparently, I've not read the book, but in the book, Jack Nicholson or the character.
I'm like, he wasn't in the book, right? I mean,
the character Jack Torrance was perfectly sane and then gradually went crazy.
Yeah.
And Jack Nicholson's character seemed to have already been a little crazy.
Well, and I think he had a drinking problem, was it? But like the second they got there, he started getting pretty weird. So
yeah, and there are a lot of discrepancies like that. Like Danny's
DeVito?
imaginary friend in
Not DeVito.
Yeah, right. In the book was very friendly, and he could see him. It wasn't just his finger.
He wasn't unfriendly in the movie. He was just weird. He didn't like do anything to
but
people.
He showed him like all sorts of like dead bodies and
true.
Creepy things, and made him say red rum, and
Maybe he was thirsty. Did you
wanted
think about
some
that?
red rum.
All right. I mean, have you had red rum?
I have not. I haven't had. Well, I have had red wine, but
Red rum is not wine.
right.
It's rum that's red.
I've never seen red rum.
Well, I have. Once you mix it in with some red soda, it turns red.
Like maybe coconut rum mixed with red soda.
Mixed with some Big
Red.
Red. Yeah, no, that's some good red rum right there.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
could see that. I mean, I've had spiced rum and I've had coconut rum.
Okay.
But for it to be red rum, you do have to mix it with something.
That's
I mean,
red.
cherry Coke and spiced rum might be okay.
But it still isn't red unless you're making homemade red soda where you just are taking regular red with some cherry grenadine and then that turns it kind of red.
Yeah, then it
Now,
would
that
be like
good.
reddish.
It still would be kind of red.
So now that we've talked about
Red rum.
island drinks with Jason and Krista,
People are going to be pausing this to go get something to drink.
we do have Malibu in the cupboard. In the cupboard.
In the cupboard, and I do have a half of a 2 liter of diet soda, Diet Coke,
Right here.
beside me.
beside us, so we could pause and fix us some drinks.
That's true.
So this movie,
Hey, would it be wrong to get our 14-year-old to go mix us some drinks?
probably a 14-year-old bartender is probably
Oh.
inappropriate.
How about one of the dogs? I think Wolfie could make a mean drink.
Probably could. He'd probably drink it though.
True. Okay, let's move on then.
So in this movie, we have Jack Torrance and his family, his wife Wendy.
Isn't that weird that they kept his name Jack?
Yeah, Wendy's the only one who did not share her name with her character, because the actor who
Already
played
Danny.
Danny's name was Danny, and Jack's name was
I
Jack.
guess they didn't like the name Shelley. Maybe it seemed, I already say it,
Well-
too happy, but Wendy, Shelley, they're both about the same.
And the characters' names were already established in the book,
Sure.
so
They-
they just happened to cast actors with the
That's
same
what they
names.
want you to think.
Jack goes to interview for a job. It turns out Jack, as Krista had mentioned, has a drinking problem.
Supposedly, he had not drank for 5 months.
He stopped drinking because he injured his son by jerking his arm too hard because his son had been going through papers on his desk and threw them all over the room. And in the book, from my understanding, Jack had lost his teaching job because he had assaulted one of his students, but that is not discussed in the movie. But that was also alcohol related.
But in the movie, he went and was applying for this job to be the
caretaker.
I almost said innkeeper, but that's still kind of the same thing of this giant hotel.
Right. The
While it
hotel
was closed
closes for the
season.
winter because the roads get too bad.
And nobody's going to be there.
And so his family just stays there for the winter and makes sure that the hotel doesn't fall apart until the next spring when they reopen. So from like October until May 1st, they are going to be there alone.
Fun.
And for several months of that time, they will be snowed in, so there will be no way to get in or out of the hotel. They do have what is called a snowcat. I have never seen a snowcat in person.
You know, it's kind of like a bobcat, except it's a snowcat.
But yeah, it's like an all-terrain vehicle that has like tank treads that can drive in the snow.
I'm pretty sure it's a live animal.
It is. It's like a thundercat.
That they put like you know how you've seen people who ride elephants in Africa?
Right.
They put one of those big riding apparatuses on top of this gigantic snowcat.
Like the tiger on Aladdin.
Correct.
That the princess rode.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right.
Yeah, that was her pet.
Mm-hmm.
That makes perfect sense.
Right. Had they stayed there longer, I'm sure we would have seen the snowcat.
We did see the snowcat.
No, I didn't see a
He
real
cut
cat.
all the spark plugs on it.
Oh, so those were the whiskers I saw.
I'm guessing.
Wow. Why didn't it just like attack him? I would have.
I don't know.
Okay. Anyhow.
So they gets the job. His family moves there. He's a writer. And so his plan is to spend the winter working on his writing. Now they warn him before they move up there that one of the families that had stayed there before.
They don't warn him. They said, did you happen to hear this story? It's really just like a tale.
Well, they said it really did happen, but it's just kind of a offhanded thing.
Right.
Sometimes these kind of situations affect people.
Right. They've made it bigger than it really is. And
But that there was a guy who was staying here with his family, and they don't know exactly what happened, but essentially by the time they came in the spring to find him,
he had killed his family. And then
his family had been cut up into pieces with an axe, and they found him with a shotgun in his mouth. And so
I'm guessing he was just hungry.
Yeah, he was hungry for some shotgun shells.
Mm-hmm.
And so Jack is not deterred by this at all.
You say he's a turd?
He's not deterred.
Sorry.
He's a turd.
He is the turd.
He's not deterred.
Sorry.
So Jack takes the job, moves his family in, him, Olive Oil, and little Danny Terrio. And they are off having a good time. Danny has an imaginary friend.
He took his 3-wheeler too.
Yes, his Hot Wheel.
Big wheel.
Big wheel. Yeah, Hot Wheels are little cars. And he would ride his big wheel around the hotel, zipping around. But he has an imaginary friend named Tony. They don't discuss this again in the movie, but Danny's name in the book, his middle name is Anthony. And Tony is his kind of the conscience, not a consciousness, but the conscience of his adult self talking to him as a child.
On the movie, though, it's his little friend that lives in his mouth that when he puts his finger up, it talks for him.
Yeah, and his little finger moves when it talks.
In case you can't see, which I know you can't, Jason.
I mean, they probably can see, they just can't see me.
Jason just moved his pointer finger for you, his index finger.
We could have some blind listeners, but...
And he made it move for you, showing you what Danny's finger would do when it talked.
Yes, it would wiggle.
Okay.
Wiggle,
Anyhow.
wiggle, wiggle. Danny's riding around. Jack
In his automobile.
is working on writing, but not very successfully. And Wendy is
Doing Wendy stuff.
Yeah, doing Wendy stuff. Taking care of little Danny and doing housework, I guess. Whatever kind of stuff Wendy does.
She smokes a lot.
She does smoke a lot. This is something that I noticed in the last movie, too. Really the last few movies. 80s movies, everybody smokes all the time.
In every room, wherever
everywhere.
you go.
Like, it doesn't matter. Like, oh, we're in the hospital, light up a cigarette. Oh, yeah, okay, we're in the room where somebody's dying, light up a cigarette.
My kid's pediatrician. Oh, you want to share one of these with me? Yeah, let's talk about Danny here. Have a cigarette with me.
Going to my kid's birthday party, they're getting ready to light the candles on the cake. Here, use my cigarette. It doesn't matter. There's just cigarettes everywhere. How everyone who was an adult in the 80s is not dead.
They could be, Jason.
I'm pretty sure they're not, because I know some of them.
Are you sure?
Yeah, my mom's one of them. She was an adult in the 80s because she raised me. My dad, on the other hand, is not still alive. And smoking had a big part to do with it.
Okay, there you have it.
And my mom didn't smoke during the 80s. So, just a lot of secondhand smoke.
So anyhow,
smoking in the 80s. You know, bands like Motley Crue were singing songs called Smoking in the Boys' Room. And I was just smoking everywhere.
Well, I was sick a whole lot during my childhood with all kinds of ear, nose, and throat problems. And I, for one, am glad that I'm not around cigarette smoke much any longer.
Yes. Yeah,
So-
we eventually had to alter plans for family get-togethers because Krista and one of my children have asthma.
Actually,
Both of them. One of them was more severe than the other. And we would end up with at least 2, sometimes 3 of the 4 of us severely ill after visiting family members who smoked or going to family get-togethers where people smoked. And
So we had to start with, hey, love you from a distance.
Yeah,
Let's
or
just talk on the phone.
We're going to be at such and such place where they don't smoke. If you want to come see us, that's where we'll be. You can come over, and we'll see you there. And so that just became the way things were. And if we were at outdoor family get-togethers and everybody showed up smoking, we would
Take a walk.
take a walk. And if it didn't get any better, we would eventually just leave.
Well, let's get back to this.
Yes.
This,
We
movie.
were talking about a movie, weren't we?
We were talking about Shelley Duvall, who played Wendy,
And chain smoked.
and she was just funny
A
in
mess.
this movie.
Literally, she said that she cried so much that she spent 12 hours a day during filming crying. And eventually she cried so much that she couldn't physically produce more tears. And she had to start keeping bottles of water on set with her to keep drinking because she was getting dehydrated.
I hope she got paid well enough for that.
Probably not. She said that this movie caused her to go into so much fatigue. She had physical health problems and started losing her hair.
Oh, I could understand that.
Stanley Kubrick was notoriously difficult to work for, would sometimes take 50 or 60 takes of a particular scene to get it exactly the way he wanted it. And it was rumored that he took over 120 takes of the staircase scene where Jack is following her up the stairs and she's swinging the bat at him. And though there are disputes over exactly how many takes it was, but that would have been an exhausting scene to shoot in one take, let alone...
Well, she said the Here's Johnny scene took 3 days to film and the use of 60 doors because he chopped an axe through the door and stuck his face in.
Right. Actually, through 2 doors.
That's crazy.
But yeah. So because they would just shoot take after take. There were times where Jack Nicholson they'd shoot a scene, Jack Nicholson would sit down with him and they'd watch it, and Jack Nicholson would go, well, that looks really good, doesn't it? And Stanley Kubrick would go, yeah, it does look really good. Let's do it again.
That would be pretty tough.
So, yeah, he was apparently near impossible to work for.
I bet.
But as the movie goes on, you see Jack starting to break down.
There was something you missed in the very beginning, and since I don't interrupt you very much,
Go ahead.
I can't talk today either. I'm going to go ahead. In the beginning, they meet the chef, and Danny thinks it's really weird, but he can hear the guy speaking to him through his mind, but while he's still talking to his mom. So that's really weird. And he doesn't understand. Well, after his mom walks off with his dad, the guy, which I forget his name, and it's on here somewhere, isn't it? He stops and he goes, I bet you're wondering how I could talk to you. And I knew what your favorite flavor of ice cream was without even asking. And Danny was like, yeah, I thought that was really weird. And he says, that's because you and I are alike. We both know things before people tell us. And so this guy...
His name was Halloran. His name was Dick Halloran, but he was referred to as Halloran. He's played by Scatman Crothers.
That would be true. But so this guy also can see things like Danny can. And so they make sure that they have a relationship up front like that. But this guy is also getting ready to leave the hotel
and he explains all of this to Danny because Danny's had these abilities to see things,
but he's not told anyone.
But he didn't really fully understand them. He just knew he could see things.
Well, but his little friend told him not to tell anyone, that he just couldn't. And
when he talks to Halloran explains them to him and explains like the history of them and how even in the Bible there were people who could see things that other people couldn't, and he referred to it as The Shining, which is where the name of the movie comes from, or the name of the book.
See, and you totally forgot all about that, didn't you?
So yes, that was pretty important.
Right, and so he leaves also for the winter.
Yes,
and heads on his way.
He goes home to an apartment that is
a deluxe apartment in the sky because he's moving on up.
Yes, it's filled with pictures of nude women. So we move on from Scatman, who is named after animal feces.
I don't know, but he left to go to his deluxe apartment in the sky because he was moving on up.
And back to the family in the hotel that is not in the sky.
Oh, and yes, also, when they were given the grand tour and being told what goes on during the winter, a keynote, Jack was told that all the liquor is removed from the premises. And so that made Wendy feel good because knowing that she didn't want any temptation there because he'd been clean for 5 months. And Jack says, oh, that's okay because nobody in my family drinks. And so the manager of the hotel was like, oh, well, that's good. That's great. You won't miss it then. And so that's a key thing to also be aware of.
Yes.
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 So moving on up.
In the words of Ed McMahon.
Moving on up. Before that, Jack was writing.
And slowly losing his mind.
And Wendy's been cooking on and off. Wendy is that's her name.
So we have a scene where Wendy goes in to check on him as he's writing, and he blows up at her.
Well, and to tell him that she's getting ready to make something for him to eat or whatever. Right. And he totally goes off on her and freaks her out. And he tells her
that if she hears him typing or not typing, if he's in that room at all, that she should leave him the F alone.
Lots of things flying in the air, and her eyes bug out more than they already do because her eyes kind of bug out anyway.
A little bit.
And she's just like staring at him with her eyes like out, like the one guy in Beetlejuice. That's the wife in Beetlejuice that makes her eyes come out onto. Yeah.
Gina Davis.
Anyway, yeah. And so she's just sitting there going, okay, all right. I said, That's not what you'd hear from me if you said that to me, Jason.
Yeah.
Oh, we don't think so.
So while all this is going on, Danny is seeing these twins around the hotel. So the twins, in the book, they weren't necessarily twins. They were just sisters. But they ended up being cast as twins because the two...
Because of the Double Mint Fun commercial?
Yes, exactly. Because two girls who auditioned, their mom brought them because they were sisters, and Stanley Kubrick
Thought, why not?
saw them and was like, well, that's even creepier to have them as twins.
Because they were identical. So not only is he seeing these two girls that keep telling him not to go to this certain hotel room in the building, but he keeps seeing this flood of blood that keeps filling up the lobby.
Coming out of the hotel, or
and
the elevator.
And down the stairs.
They said that it took over a year to get that scene
Filmed.
and edited the way Stanley Kubrick wanted it.
He sounds hard to please. I would not want to be married to
He
him.
sounds like an arsehole.
I would not want to be married to him.
No.
Like, how many times do you have to finish positions and stuff for, your lovemaking to be right? No, cut. Not that way, this way. I'd be like,
Do it yourself.
DIY.
DIY.
Same color, same car.
Do your itself.
it. Do your it. Anyway, we're moving on from what he's seeing. And then when his dad, though, starts going crazy on his mom, he can see it, too, when he's upstairs in his room.
But he's, like, manipulating things to happen and even, like, putting thoughts in his dad's head.
I don't think that happened.
I don't know. There's weird stuff going on.
That's not what was happening. It was... Who was putting thoughts in his head was the guy who had already murdered his family. He was the one putting thoughts in on his head, not him. I think you were watching a different movie.
But he's seeing the thoughts.
No, he is. You are correct.
And
because he is special and sensitive to these things.
He's so special that apparently the little finger puppet that he does, that was not scripted. Like, he just, when he did the audition and they had him do the voice of Tony, that's just what he did. When he did the voice.
Jason's finger is wiggling again,
he did his little finger wiggle. And
Jason is right-handed, so his right pointer finger is a wiggling.
So when they're like, okay, now do the voice of Tony saying something, and he's like, Red Rob.
All right. We should move on.
And they're like, hey, that's cool. We'll just have you do that. And he's like, I was going to do it anyways.
So his dad's getting creepier and scarier with his mom.
Well, and then Danny ends up with bruises on his neck. And
because
they don't know why.
Well, he went into the room he wasn't supposed to go in because the
door
he
was open.
Well, when he was in his big wheeler thingy, the door was open and he couldn't help himself.
And at first, Wendy thinks that it was Jack because Jack's had a history of abusing Danny.
Oh, and that pisses Jack off.
And Jack doesn't seem to be convinced that it wasn't him.
Well,
but then he's like, it was. He's getting really mad about it.
He's like, how dare you? How dare you say I'd do that?
And then
I ain't mean.
But she's not even there when he's yelling about it. He's down in his special writing room by himself, the Colorado room.
I'm pretty sure that happened when he walked into the ballroom and found the dead bartender, and the bartender starts serving him drinks that aren't supposed to be there.
Yes,
because
the
he starts drinking
bourbon
again
that he serves him, which is Jack Daniels, which
drove
this
Jason
is a
crazy
pet peeve of mine because I have
movie.
many times been to a restaurant or a bar and been like, what bourbons do you have? And they'll be like, well, we've got Jack Daniels. For the love of God, Jack Daniels is not a bourbon.
No.
So, but even this movie, the bartender even says, I will get you a bourbon, and pours him Jack Daniels. And it's like...
Well, Jason, you got to think about it. This guy's dead. What more do you expect from him? He's not alive. He's dead.
But when they write
You're
the
lucky
script...
he's even moving.
Just write the script. I'm going to pour you a glass of whiskey.
Well,
or if they're going to say I'm going to pour you a glass of bourbon, then get frickin' bourbon.
Stanley was just so anal about everything else. He obviously slipped somewhere.
Apparently, you would think someone who does 60 takes of every shot would know what bourbon was.
Apparently not. So anyhow,
What an ass hat.
Jack's been hitting the bottle again. And so he's down there.
But it's an imaginary bottle because
I
there's
don't know
no
if
real
it is
alcohol
or not, Jason.
there.
He's down there talking to the bartender and getting drunk.
And then
And the more he drinks, the meaner he
Shelley
gets.
Duvall comes
Wendy?
running.
Her name's Wendy.
Yeah, she comes running into him and says, and of course she doesn't see the imaginary bartender,
Or the drink.
and says, "We've got a problem. There's someone else in the hotel." And
I found out from whatever the kid's name is,
Danny.
Danny, that those neck prints came from somebody in room such and such. There's an old lady in there.
in the bathtub, and she was choking him. And so Jack goes to the room.
Well, no, he's actually goes off on her first.
Right, but then he goes to the room, and there is someone in the bathtub, but it's not an old lady. It's a young woman.
And she's naked.
And she's naked, and she gets out of the bathtub, doesn't say a word. He comes over to her. She puts her arms around him. They start kissing, but then when he looks in the mirror, like the skin on her back's falling off, and her butt's all saggy.
And she turns into an old decaying woman.
And yeah, then when he steps away, besides like her skin falling off, her boobs are all saggy, and
She starts cackling and laughing because
but
he's
then
freaked
she's
out.
also still in the bathtub cackling and
Yes,
laughing. So
she's
it's
everywhere, Jason.
and then
Do you know what the moral of the story is? You don't cheat on your wife, Jason. That's the moral of the
well,
story.
I had no intentions. So
Well, I hear you.
and then
I'm telling everyone who's listening.
he leaves and goes back to see Wendy, and Wendy's like, "Well, did you check the room out?" "Yeah." "Well, was there anyone there?" And he lies and says no.
No, there's nobody there.
And
And then he tells her that he's pretty sure that he did it to himself. That, he's been acting
there's
really
no other
strange.
explanation for it.
And so he had to have done it to himself, that he's making this stuff up.
So we go on, and Jack keeps getting meaner. He keeps having visions with this guy who is now telling him that he needs to severely punish his wife and child because they are
Out of
plotting
control.
against him, and that his son has been communicating with a derogatory term for a colored person.
Which is the cook.
Yes, and
And he said, you can't allow that to happen.
they go back and forth repeating this derogatory term 3 or 4 times, which was very uncomfortable. I mean, they don't say it in a way that like glamorizes the term, but it's a term that I don't hear very often. So it was still like uncomfortable to hear even in a movie repeated. Maybe if I listened to a lot of hip hop, I would hear that word more often, but I don't. So it was a little
Disturbing?
disturbing, amongst other things in the movie, like the saggy
lady.
boobed old lady.
So anyway,
So he,
the one day before, when he goes off on his wife, she is looking for him, and she sees the typewriter in what he's been writing, and she looks, and it says, "All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy," and then it just keeps saying Jack a dull boy everywhere, and then she looks through the box of sheets that he's already typed, and every one of them says,
there's like hundreds of sheets of paper that
Says-
just say that, formatted differently
Yes.
with indentations and
making shapes on the papers, and that's every single sheet, and she just keeps going through sheets and sheets and sheets. And he eventually, she has a baseball bat in her hand, which she's been carrying with her every time she leaves their room. And so he comes up behind her and he says, "What are you doing? Do you like what I've written?" And of course he's got a freaky look on his face. And that begins
the scene where he chases her up the stairs.
and she hits him with the bat a couple of times,
Yeah.
and so he falls down.
Yeah. Now those pages, they said his secretary, Stanley Kubrick's secretary, actually spent all of her time for several weeks, possibly over a month, typing just those words over and over again to populate all of those sheets of paper.
Because there was no word processing then.
Right, with just the words. Yeah, you couldn't copy and paste, And so that was her job for like a month, was just typing. All work and no play makes Jack a very dull boy. But yes, she finally clobbers him in the head and knocks him down the stairs, and then she drags him into a
food pantry
that is very secure and locks. And
she goes to make a call out to the local police station and finds out that he has disabled the radio and it is no longer usable.
And, well, he tells her, when she says that she's going to take Danny and leave, he starts laughing and says, well, you need to check the radio and the snowcat because you aren't going anywhere. And starts laughing. And sure enough, he's dismantled the radio and he's cut the spark plug wires on the snowcat. And so they're stuck there. And then the bartender, who is the guy who had previously murdered his entire family.
And killed himself.
Shows up outside of the
storage
pantry and tells him that he doesn't think that he has what it takes to do the job. Jack assures him that he does, and he says, well, at this point, his only option is to
kill them.
Yeah, to take care of them permanently. And he says that it would be his pleasure. And the ghost of the bartender lets him out of the pantry. And then, by then, Halloran arrives.
Because he's been worried this whole time because he can't get in touch with the police station, can't get in touch with them. And he just, since he has his own abilities, he knows something's wrong.
Yeah, well, when Halloran, before Halloran gets there, Jack has gotten free and has chased Danny out, and Danny's running through the maze.
Well, first of all, Wendy's upstairs and has locked the doors and stuff, but she has gotten Danny out of the bathroom window.
That's true, and that's when he comes
through. She can't fit through the bathroom window, and that's when the whole through the door, here's Johnny Business comes, and she's been screaming, and she just makes these super weird faces. Yeah, and every time he hits the axe with the door, she screams no and makes these... And I laughed because it's just the faces she makes are just so funny.
Some of the famous lines like,
come out, wherever you are.
Come out during that time. And then the intro line we played at the beginning of the podcast where he gives the little pig, can I come in?
Yeah.
And of course, finally, when he breaks through the bathroom door and sticks his face through and gives the here's Johnny. And that line almost got cut because that was ad-libbed. And
because the producer wasn't familiar with that line from Johnny Carson's show.
Right, because Stanley Kubrick was British and the Johnny Carson show was not, or the Tonight Show was not big in Britain.
Right, so Jack Nicholson had to talk him into it and let him know just how important that line would be.
Right, and it's become one of the most iconic lines in horror movie history.
Even though Jason had never seen this movie until yesterday.
That's correct. I was very aware of the movie, and I had seen the 1997 three-part miniseries that Stephen King was part of, where they remade this with Steven Weber as Jack Torrance. Stephen King was a bigger fan of that production just because it was much more accurate to the books.
He had a lot more control over it.
Yes, and this particular version, Stanley Kubrick basically took it and did what he wanted with it. So the general outline of the story was Stephen King's story, but Stanley Kubrick completely took it his own direction. And Stephen King was very disappointed with the outcome. But this was the first of Stephen King's books to have ever been made into a movie. He was not the legend that he is today, and did not have the same level of status that he does today. I don't think someone today could take one of his books and make a movie and do whatever they wanted with it. He has too much status in the business.
So back where we were, at some point, Wendy cuts Jack's hand when he tries to put it through the door because she had a knife. And he pulls his hand back and he's pretty ticked. But then I don't remember if the ghost makes him aware of he's aware that...
He hears the snowcat pull up.
Right, that's true. And because I keep forgetting his name.
Halloran?
Yeah. Is out there. Well, he gets downstairs and he kills him when he gets out of the vehicle.
Very quickly.
And then he realizes that his son's out there. So then he goes chasing him through this maze, but it just looks like a bunch of snow tunnels. You can't see much. And so he's chasing him like crazy.
Yeah, they're running through the maze for quite a while.
And in the meantime, though, Wendy comes downstairs and she turns around and she can see
the ghost.
The ghost, yeah, which is crazy. And she sees the blood start coming down from the stairs and the elevator.
Yeah, the scene of the elevator with the blood pouring out that Danny had been seeing in visions, she sees, and she takes off running out. And Danny runs out.
Because Danny actually found a way to trick his dad. And so Danny gets out of the maze and leaves his dad behind. And so in the meantime, Wendy runs out, sees what's happened to the older man on the ground, grabs her son, and gets into the snowcat.
Gets Danny in there.
Yes.
And they,
take off.
of course it struggles to start because that has to build some suspense.
But it didn't last that long, not as long as I thought it would.
And then
they take off just as he's coming out of the maze. And
then it cuts back to him, probably whether it be weeks or days or months, you don't know, but he's just sitting there with that creepy smile on his face, completely frozen
to death.
And then they go to who knows when, like when the hotel's opened again, and they show people coming in, and the picture in the hallway that had been there at the very beginning
from 1920
with 4th of July celebration from 1920. And you have to go back to a scene earlier where he is arguing with the bartender, telling him that he used to be the caretaker, and that, not the bartender is someone completely different. We kept saying that, but he's arguing with the guy who had killed his family, that he used to be the caretaker and that he killed his family. And the guy keeps telling him, no, you're the caretaker. You've always been the caretaker. It's always been you. And so then when you go back and you see the picture from 1921, Jack is a younger looking version of Jack with short, clean cut hair.
And he's there front and center.
Is front and center in the picture.
So that was...
And that is how the movie ends.
Correct. Little weird.
So let's see if there's any trivia tidbits that we missed. We covered most of them during the discussion of the movie.
To get Jack Nicholson in the right agitated mood, he was only fed cheese sandwiches for 2 weeks because he hated them.
Yes, so that got him angry. Also, Danny was not told that he was filming a horror movie. He was told it was a drama. The scene where she's carrying him away from Jack while he's shouting at them when he was supposed to have the bruised neck. She's actually carrying a life-size dummy because they didn't want Lloyd to be subject to Jack's yelling and screaming. It was several years later when they finally showed him a heavily edited version of the film, and he realized what the movie was, and he did not see an uncut version of the film until 11 years later, so 1991, when he was 17. So he's close to our age. So we talked about Danny and his finger,
and
Shelley and her hair falling out.
Robin Williams.
The miniseries we talked about.
I remember watching that.
And The Imaginary Friend.
How about Stephen King said, Kubrick's version of Wendy Torrance is one of the most misogynistic characters ever to be put to film. He said she's just there to scream and be stupid. Yes. And that's true. And I said that the whole time. I'm like, why does she look so stupid the whole time? She just looked dumb, and I just didn't get that.
Right. Now, Jack Nicholson had said that her role was one of the most difficult roles he'd ever seen acted. So it's not, I don't know that it's a discredit to her acting that the role was what it was. I think it was more to what Stanley Kubrick made of the role. And of course, Stephen King did not care for the movie, so I'm sure that played into his take on that. There were some other people looked at for the role of Jack, including Chevy Chase, which that would be hard to see.
Leslie Nielsen, also hard.
Leslie Nielsen, you have to understand, though, before A Naked Gun, he was a serious dramatic actor. That was his first comedy role, and then he went on to make... Actually, Airplane was his first comedy role. And then he went on to make slapstick comedies from then on out. So, Martin Sheen and Christopher Reeve, who played Superman. So we will now...
I can't imagine it, though, as anybody else.
Well, yeah,
Nicholson. I mean, the arching of his eyebrows. I mean, I know they're always like that, but it was just perfect in this movie.
And in 1980, even, like, seeing Robin Williams in the role. Like, I've seen Robin Williams play, like, in 1 Hour Photo, where he played the creepy neighbor who took photos and stuff. Like, after seeing that, I could see him in a role like this. But in 1980, where he'd basically done Mork and Mindy, I couldn't see him in this kind of a role. So we are going to take a short break, and we will be right back.
Show starts in 1 minute. Please remember to replace the speaker on the post when you leave the theater.
And we're back. The next thing we will talk about is whether or not this movie gets made today in 2019. I think that, I'll get your opinion first. What do you think?
Sure. I think it could.
I think that it could. I think there are some things that would very distinctly change about the movie. Shelley Duvall's character, I think, would have a lot more substance.
For sure.
The thing also that I noticed compared to horror movies today, and we've talked about this about a lot of the 80s movies, especially through like the first half of the movie, maybe even 2/3 of the movie, things move kind of slow. And it's not until like the last third of the movie that really it holds your constant attention. So there's a lot of story building. And it just is kind of slow paced through all of that. And for 1980, I mean, we watched Poltergeist, which was a 1982 movie. It was kind of the same way. And that was pretty typical of movies. In 2019, most movies clip along at a lot quicker pace. There's a lot more going on to keep your attention. Maybe that speaks as much to our culture and our ADHD sort of mentality as it does to the quality of the movies. But I think that would change significantly.
You seem to have more issue with that than I do. So, but that's possible.
And then we will move on to our reviews. We will start out with the review from Roger Ebert. Now, Roger Ebert has this on his list of his top movies of all time, or had it. I guess Roger Ebert's deceased now, so that will kind of inform what kind of review he gives. He did give it 4 out of 4. This is the first movie that we've watched and read Roger Ebert's review that he gave a 4 out of 4. He says this movie is not about ghosts, but about madness and the energy that sets loose in an isolated situation primed to magnify them. Yes, there are events we believe, but there is no way within the film to be sure with any confidence exactly what happens or precisely how or really why.
Alrighty then.
So Roger Ebert apparently liked the movie but doesn't know what it's about.
He sounds a little confused.
So then we will give our reviews, and we have to decide if this movie is... or if we kind of don't feel quite so hot about it. Here I am, stuck in the middle with you. Or if we just didn't really care for it. I can't go for that, no. No can do, I can't go for that, no. So, Krista.
No, I went first last time.
Okay, I'm going to go with this being hot, sticky sweet.
Again, I may put it in the top category, but I cannot go along with saying something is hot, sticky, sweet. So, I'm still thinking of another way to put that.
This is an all-time classic horror movie.
To be watched again.
Again, that I've never watched before. Honestly, just in the last couple of years, I've started more getting into horror movies.
Jason, I need to be honest with you and up front and tell you something in front of everyone. It wasn't my first time.
I believe that because whereas I grew up in a really conservative...
That was supposed to be funny.
Christian...
Do you understand?
...family.
You just keep talking. You keep talking.
I just a heathen.
Oh my gosh.
And apparently a whore.
No, apparently you just don't understand jokes very well because you just
joke.
continue to
the joke is that you
vomit from your
whore.
Mouth the whole time.
Because it wasn't your first time.
You weren't supposed to call me a whore. You know, this could have been my second time, but I don't think that would make me a whore. Thank you. I think we should move on now.
So, a very good movie, an excellent movie, a movie that I definitely would watch again. Our youngest child wanted to watch it with us, but seemed to tune out about 10 minutes in and lose interest.
Speaking of ADHD.
Yes, our youngest child is clinically diagnosed with ADHD. So movies have to move along at a pretty good clip to keep her attention. But, yeah, I would definitely watch this again with you or without you.
That sounds about right.
So, well, I mean, if you're not there and it's on, what am I supposed to do?
Whatever it takes to make you happy.
I guess it's not 1986 now where, like, you have to watch the movie when it shows up on TBS. I don't think this was ever on TBS. When it shows up on HBO at 10 o'clock at night, you either watch it then or you don't watch it.
I think what you're saying is that if you need to make yourself happy, you don't care if your wife's around or not, you're just going to do it.
I do care if my wife's around.
I'm pretty sure that that's what you just said.
I don't think that's what I said at all.
That's what I heard.
Because I find that my wife is...
I need to get rid of that button. I think we're to the part where we can say in closing that you can follow us on Twitter at Sweet Shiznits. You can follow Jason at Gravy Boat Pirate or me at Krista White 73, although it might be a little boring. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/Sweet Shiznits.
Sweet.
Excuse me?
Not sweet, sweet.
I said sweet. Instagram at Sweet Shiznits. Email us. I don't think the inbox gets used very much. sweetshiznits@gmail.com.
And now, which is not on our notes, you can find us on the web at sweetshiznits.com or www.sweetshiznits.com. Or if you really want to get fancy, you can go to http://
HTTPS.
www.sweetshiznits.com.
There was no.
You can put an S if you wanted.
HTTPS. Share our posts and our tweets, please. Let your friends, family followers, your boss, your boss's wife, or your boss's husband, or somebody.
Your boss's
let them know about us.
girlfriend.
It's a good gift for us. And money's good. Money works too. Make us sound better.
You can find us on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher. Anywhere you can find quality podcasts, we are there.
The Sweet Shiznits.
You can just Google Sweet Shiznits and you'll find us. Don't forget
to subscribe, rate, review.
Your ratings and reviews make us more visible.
and help
Otherwise,
us.
we are transparent.
Help others to find us.
Find us.
Go
we're,
ahead.
We're in Muncie.
Go ahead.
Sweet
Sweet
Shiznits
Shiznits.
is paid for by listeners like you. Or specifically by you.
On the bayou.
If
No?
you're in Louisiana, sure.
To be a supporter of Sweet Shiznits, go to patreon.com/Sweet Shiznits.
Or you can just go to sweetshiznits.com and click the little button that says Become a Patron.
All right.
Supporters will get access to bonus content and help shape the content of our show. We'll also mention you on the air.
Unless you don't want to be mentioned, and then you can say, please
Just
don't
let
talk
us
about
know.
me.
We will mention you as much or as little as you want.
We can tell people you're our best friends, or we can just pretend like you didn't do it if you don't want anyone to know.
We'll also send you lovely gifts and surprises. And
Surprise, there's an 8x10 glossy of our faces.
yes, which you can just get by going on our website. There's a big one right
Hey,
there
I've got
on the
lots
homepage.
I've got lots of other pictures I can send.
Yes.
Some might be scary.
Mm-hmm.
Of you.
The one in my thong.
Ew. You don't
Why
have
do you
thongs.
always respond like that?
Because I see you.
We're married.
I don't think they want to see you
I'm
bent.
supposed to be
Listen,
the love of your life.
You are, but I don't think they want to see you bent over, like tightening up the electrical socket today. I don't think they want to see.
I was replacing it. You can't tighten up an electrical
I
socket.
don't think they want to see 4 inches of your butt crack. Do you?
Probably. Well, I don't know. It depends on who you ask, I suppose.
I mean,
Some people may be into hairy butt crack.
I love
The
your
kids
butt
don't
crack,
appreciate
okay?
it.
It's all right.
So
I'm not really into any butt cracks. I just don't like to see people's butt
yeah,
cracks.
because in the middle of it is a butthole, and that's where the poop comes out.
Okay, let's move on.
So,
I think we've said all we're going to say today.
Yeah, we've said all we're going to say. So,
Okay, so I'll see you later, huh? I'll give you a call.
and we will talk to you again next week. We look forward to it. We'll see another movie and tell you all about it. In the meantime, don't forget to subscribe and tell your mom I said goodbye.
Bye.